Thank you for staying with us. The federal government has announced the removal of value-added tax on various energy products, including diesel, liquefied natural gas, also known as cooking gas, compressed natural gas, CNG, electric vehicles, amongst others. According to the Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, these measures are designed to lower the cost of living, bolster energy security, and accelerate Nigeria's transition to cleaner energy sources. These reforms are also part of a broader series of investment-driven policy initiatives championed by President Tinubu to revitalize Nigeria's oil and gas sector. Joining us in the studio is a strategy consultant and public affairs analyst, Kenny Adenugba. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you join us.
Good to have you again, to be here again.
Now, how far-reaching is the strategy by the government to lower the cost of living when it decided to remove value-added tax on some of these issues, diesel, cooking gas, and the likes?
Well, I would say that it's a good one, first and foremost. Anything to bring reduction in such things is a good one. However, how far-reaching this will be is something else we need to consider.
Okay.
One, while it's good to say that about 7.5% will go off the cost of energy in this regard, we must also ask ourselves questions. The players in the industry and those who are the retailers and whatever they may be, question is this going to reflect in the ultimate pricing with the consumers? Because we've seen it before, where such reductions have happened, yet people did not have the effect of it trickle down to the average consumer. So that is something that needs to be considered. So when government has done this, government also needs to ensure that the players in the industry are able to do what they need to do so that it can affect the people positively. And looking at it really, at the end of the day, it's good to have this. However, it can't be in isolation. It shouldn't be in isolation, rather, because when you look at it, for manufacturers, it's fantastic to say, especially if you do heavy manufacturing, even low business manufacturers. However, other costs of production are there, If those costs of production still remain high or are going higher, then this may be of not much effect. For example, you have to look at the cost of logistics, and supply chain for the manufacturers, whether they are large-scale manufacturers or small-scale manufacturers. All of these things are there. For the household, it's also good for those who are able to, because everybody actually, one way or the other, we have to use energy. And this is a step in the right direction to help to drive down the cost of living for people. However, let us see it translate. That's the critical thing. Because it's easy to actually have this policy come out. Yes, it's done, but we're not seeing the effect. So people must also, like I said, sometimes government also may have a good intention, but the people that are going to implement and also run this scheme may be the problem. So it's very easy for us to slam the government, but at the same time, we have to talk to ourselves as players across board. Whether as individuals, the petrol station owners, the attendants, the people that are doing all manner of things within that value chain, we must talk to ourselves. If government has said this should go down by 7.5%, which is removing the VAT, which is 7.5 really, that means that on the average, you're talking about 75 naira per litre going off. If we look at it, assuming that it's 1,000 per litre, that's saying that the average business person in that sector is having a reduction of 7.75 naira per litre. And so can it trickle down to the people that are buying? That is the most important thing to look at. And like I said, it can't be looked in isolation. Thank God that the withholding tax matter has also come on, which we have an issue with in the sense of the factor to say that if you're saying 25 million below business in a year, the question is, the inflation rate and what have you has made a mess of that. So you are talking about, if you now begin to break it down to per day, you are talking about maybe like somebody who is doing the business of making a total turnover of 70,000 naira a day. And so if you look at all of these things, if we're able to do other areas of the economy to help to drive down costs, it would be good rather than this being in isolation.
What are the areas?
Like we said, I just mentioned withholding tax that's being reduced, but that is not going to make much impact, because if you don't look at 75 million to 100 million per annum business ownership, business turnover, it's going to make mess of anything, because we're not even going to be talking about micro businesses. We're going to be talking of nano businesses at most.
Perhaps that's why the petroleum tanker drivers are also, while appreciating the government for this move, they're also saying government should address issues that have to do with supply, loading supply, and distribution of these products across the country because of the bottlenecks. And maybe that may be the reason why government has said there was going to be a removal of VAT, but yet we don't see that translating to how much the everyday user would buy it eventually. There may not be any difference eventually, so the government also needs to work on that. Is that part of what you're saying?
Absolutely. So, for example, now, when you get to the issue of, you mentioned the issue of loading, trucking, offloading, and all those kind of things. Let us look at how those things impact on the total costs. Those days, most of the time, we used to talk about landing costs. Now, we're taking fuel relatively from Dangote. So the landing cost from wherever it's coming from, whether Malta, Togo, wherever, is not the issue right now. It's to say there are other ancillary costs that these business people, those within that sector, within that value chain, are incurring. How do we reduce those taxations? How do we reduce those costs that incur? Because there are a lot of bottlenecks, there are a lot of things there and there, port this, port that, these other rates and whatever. All those rates, can we look at them? Can government help us to look at them in a way as to actually reduce or collapse some of these things, so that ultimately the 7.5 value VAT that has been removed, that they don't have to pay, can make sense? Because if you are removing that and other things are coming up and they're even growing higher, it's going to make a mess of the paltry thing that's coming from VAT. Because the VAT thing is just a drop in the ocean as at now, which is a good thing to do, but there is more to be done. We need to look at more things. Of course, there are implications for the government in this regard. Absolutely. We must look at it. Yeah. There's a revenue implication for the government. Government is also losing. We must appreciate that government is losing. If for an average household that we add, look at the number that we are in the nation, and each household depending on energy one way or the other, and 7.5 VAT is taken out. Now, look at that cost to the government, because as good as government is now subsidizing one way or the other, what said or not said. However, government is also losing revenue that they could use for infrastructure and other things, and other areas of development. Right. But while they're losing that, how do the people then really feel the impact of that sacrifice of government? So through the value chain, we must understand the need for everybody to play well and also consider the common man. It's critical. Because at the end of the day, what we find out is that a lot of our people don't care, as long as they can make their profit. But the profit margin of the small businesses are so thin that if anything comes up, yes, while you may say that the 7.5 VAT reduction is helping them, any other thing that comes up in the one way or the other, because the economy is not stable as it were right now, any other thing that will shake that situation will increase their cost of production, will increase their cost of doing business, and their profit margin is gone because it's so thin already. So that is why we're saying that VAT removal is fantastic, and it's also part of the big policy of government right now to move away from fossil fuel gradually into cleaner energy.
Cleaner energy, that's what government is doing.
So we can see that, okay? However, we must be careful that even while we're talking about this 7.5 VAT deduction, removal and what have you, we do not have a challenge of insufficient supplies. That will come with its own problem again, because that will then take us into the black market scenario. And we know that once that happens, it changes all the calculations. So we need to be careful.
In fact, you have broken it down so well that my mind is just popping here and there, my thoughts rather just popping here and there. And you talk about the fact that government is making a sacrifice. And if it is to look at a holistic approach, then it has to bring other stakeholders to the table.
Absolutely.
Are they also willing to make that sacrifice? Because they're also looking at revenue generation, whichever way they can.
Well, you see, the reality is this. For those within the, through the line and the value chain, you can make your money. For example, we've been told that when you look at all the other areas of production in the oil and gas sector, it is actually possible to actually give gasoline, that is PMS, to the people at no cost, because other areas of production, all the other derivatives, you can sell and make much money as well. However, beyond all of that, everybody is in business to make profit, agreed. But in a way as to now impact negatively, the reality is this: where I come from, they said the imam that predicts famine must also realize, or that actually predicts or prays for famine, must also realize that his own child will not hit the rosary beads. He will not. So we are all in this together. If we think that we want to also make life more difficult for ourselves, it impacts on the home front. You may make your millions and billions of dollars in the process over, all those slang of 3 Cut 1, 3 Cut 1 and what have you. You may have all of those things. However, there's a chain reaction that comes with it. There's a ripple effect, because you will also go to the market, you will go to the supermarket, the energy cost is also there. And
what you thought you made.
What you thought you made, you're expending it somewhere else.
Right.
So you may think that you're making so much gain, but you're losing ultimately, because the reduction that should come in those other areas of life that you will spend money on is not coming. It's increasing. So whatever you think you have gained here, you're losing here. So there must be a balance in whatever we do and we look at. And government must also help us to look at this other area, which is still part of the energy environment. We're talking about the energy, that is the electricity tariff.
Yes.
That is another thing, because when we're talking about the fact that, we're looking at the clean energy, we're looking at this and what have you, government must also help the people to look at the electricity area of energy, because that sector is critical for the people. If we have fantastic situation in that sector, the electricity supply is constant, relatively, and the cost is affordable. Then there will be a balance, relative balance. Right? There will be a relative balance.
But under its current structure, talking electricity, what's it like for you?
Under its current structure is actually quite strangulated, relatively. Light is better. We must have confessed that light is better. At least I enjoy light better than before. However, the cost is quite suffocating. It's strangulating, maybe because of the band in which I'm in. However, whether band A or whatever band anybody wants to talk about, the reality is it is not what it should be. Government needs to look at that to help the people, so that once that also comes down, even manufacturers will heave a sigh of relief. And then the roads as well. So let government, as government is looking at all of these things, they also must look at infrastructure within the clean energy environment. Solar, wind energy infrastructure development they must begin to look at all of that. Because if we don't look at that, what we'll do is we'll push ourselves back to fossil fuel. Dependence on fossil fuel, which is petrol.
Because if you even look at the breakdown of whom this reduction in tax or removal of tax applies to, one could also argue that who are the people that are, to benefit from this? Will we call them ordinary people? Because looking at the CNG, how many people already are utilizing it? Gas and all of that, how many people are utilizing it, as against those who are still reliant on PMS?
Well, for the CNG, just last week, the government distributed to some person, about 2,000.
But in terms of that percentage against, the vast number of persons.
No, I agree with you. You see, that's which is why we're saying beyond just this. Of course, we're looking at LPG, CNG, and all those critical, cleaner energy still, and what have you. However, the reality on ground is this. We must come to terms with the fact that not everybody may be fully touched. Right. It is true. We can't be, much as we want everything to be good, we can't. It's not possible to create a state of nirvana, except we're going to deceive ourselves. Right. Some you will always have, even if the government today puts 20 million naira in the hands or 100 million naira in the hands of every individual citizen. Give it 1 week to 2 weeks, you still have the poor. That's the reality. However, government can only strive and try as much to ensure that every citizen is impacted. And like I keep saying, the impact is not just from federal government. The subnationals have a lot to do in this regard. We talk about federal government distributing buses and what have you. What are the state governments doing in that regard?
The states did something.
We know the state did. How about other states? Right. How about Ondo? How about Ekiti? How about Taraba? How about this and that? It's not for one state governor to be, government to be giving, wheelbarrows to citizens and what have you. It is to be able to look at how do we make life easier. Because when you do, everybody may not be able to afford vehicle. Everybody may not be able to afford to change, to convert to CNG. However, if the public transportation is CNG compliant, it reduces the cost of transportation. Yes. If the roads are good and well laid out, if the local government and the state governments are able to do the inner roads and the trunk B, trunk C, and D routes, and the route to farm and the route to market is well taken care of, it becomes easier for the people. But where you want to do your logistics and the roads are terrible, I mean, you want to go from the moment you leave Benin going to Onitsha, you are in trouble. You can't go from Kogi to Abuja. It's another wahala. Absolutely. So at the end of the day, those are things that we're talking about. Oyo Ogbomoso is a problem as well. So when you look at all of these areas and what have you, these are critical areas that government will need to help, to be able to help infrastructural development and in the process also reduce cost of movement for the people. Because all of these things are, they're all tied together. So we can't leave one and neglect the other. The impact will still be felt one way or the other.
But with what government has done or is trying to do with this one, you mentioned something earlier, how this reflects eventually on the lifestyle of the ultimate consumer is there a way government perhaps can insulate this from every form of influence that will ensure that the effort it is making, is not, is it subverted? I'm trying to get the word such that the consumer still get to feel the impact one way or the other. There are those you mentioned who still want to take advantage, such that we do not get feel the impact. But what can government do?
Well, what can government do? Government can do a lot more in the area of monitoring.
Right.
Monitoring is critical. You see, you must monitor and evaluate the policy implementation. In strategy, it's a critical path. You've done your analysis, you've done everything you want to do, you start your implementation, you must come to a point of evaluation and monitoring. You must monitor. You go out, you have the agencies within the oil and gas sector, within the ministries and what have you, and the agencies that are related, that regulate rather. So they must go ahead and find a way to regulate and monitor the activities of players in that sector. That way, it helps in a way to be able to keep people seated to do what is proper. Why we will not rule out recalcitrants, and we will not rule out people who will do sharp practices, but at least relatively to reduce it to a barest minimum experience. That is critical for us. So government needs to up the ante when it comes to monitoring and regulation as well. For whatever it's worth, most of the time, even our CSOs, our civil society organizations, don't help matters sometimes. Because in the course of regulating and enforcement, some of them come out to begin to make noise over what is not. Because at the end of the day, we realize that you can't have no absolute democratic laissez-faire. It's not going to work if you want to, because people will, there will always be people who want to cheat in the system. So if you let everything go as it comes, you're not going to have the right approach. So for this to get down to the people, government must also regulate, enforce, and monitor, regulate and enforce.
All right.
That's critical.